Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive, and welcome back to part 2 of my top 10 adventure games of all time. And this is going to cover numbers 5 through 1. And then after we're done, we will talk about a few games that were on the short list that didn't quite make it, and maybe a few brief reasons why. So don't think there's any housekeeping to cover, so we might as well just kick off the list with number 5. And I believe this is the only sci-fi game on the list. And that is from Cody Miller, and that's 2014's Xia Legend of a Drift System. In a nice size box there. And that is specifically with the Embers of a Forsaken Star expansion, because it adds in the really cool solo mode and the economic board that makes part of the game, the trading, the merchant aspect of the game, a lot more interesting. So Xia Legends of the Drift System is a kind of an open world, sandboxy sci-fi game where you're flying a spaceship around. Think of a board game version of something like, like Cowboy Bebop or Firefly, where you can do kind of anything you want to do to work your way towards getting those points of fame to win the game. You can become a merchant, a trader, an explorer, a pirate. Oftentimes in the game, you have to do a few of those roles per game, kind of, and especially in the solo game, depending on the nature of the NPCs that are on the board. That will sometimes dictate what you have to do to win the game. And the solo mode is really great. It has a cool little campaign system where you can slowly build up your pilot as you are living your pilot's life, and it's always a fun time. The last time I played the game was about 2 months ago, and I had a blast playing it. The game I played, the one of the NPCs on the board, his role was he was always like just dead set on destroying any ships that had cargo. So I was able to completely ignore the merchant role of the merchant side of things, and I could focus just on exploration and that kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun. I always have a good time playing it. It's a weird game because it uses some really outdated mechanisms like roll and move, but it works, and it creates a really neat sense of adventure. I love being in that universe. I love the way it looks. It kind of has an outdated look too, but I think it really works with the game that is being presented. So that was number 5 with Legends of a Drift System, specifically with the Embers of a Forsaken Star expansion. Coming in at number 4 is an absolute classic by now, and that is Runebound, and that is from 2005, created by Martin Wallace and Daryl Hardy. Martin Wallace. It is so weird that Martin Wallace would have made something like this. And the last time I took a look at this game, if you look at the art there, so old Fantasy Flight art, it's old enough now to where it has this kind of iconic classic look. Like you can tell that is like early Fantasy Flight art, just from the colors, from the line work, from the designs of the characters, and I like that. It's kind of entering in that realm of old Games Workshop art where it has a specific look to it, and that's cool. Like it's neat that I could have had this game when it was new, and now look at it and recognize that it is becoming this kind of classic game, and it is a classic. It's a great hex crawl and overland crawl, and the game has some of the best expansions I've ever played in a board game. It has a series of big box expansions that some of them completely change the way you play the game with these map overlays. Some of them add in these survival mechanisms where you have to deal with like water in the desert or the temperature in the snow. Then it has all these small box expansions that add in different allies, different encounters, different items. It's got a great movement system where you're rolling to move dice, but you're rolling terrain symbols so you can move across terrain. I definitely do play with like most of the house rules that speed up the game, like faster leveling up and that kind of thing. I separate the items into types, so when I go into town, I can draw like one of each, like a weapon, an armor, a rune, that kind of thing. It makes the game faster and more fun for me. But I don't mind playing that game because I typically only play it solo. It is too long as a group game, but I always have a good time playing Runebound 2nd Edition. Super great game. Okay, so that was number 4. And for Martin Wallace, really? It's just so weird. I always picture Martin Wallace making these kind of like, really solid mid to upper weight Euro-y, normal style game. So whenever I pick up that box and I see Martin Wallace's name on there, I'm always like, Martin Wallace? But, all right, so coming in at number 3, and this game it really could be the poster child for this entire category of game. And that is, of course, from Jason C. Hill. And that is 2011's giant box of Fortune and Glory. All right, so Fortune and Glory, like I said, this is the epitome. It exemplifies the adventure game. It is a globe-trotting game where you are playing a group of adventurers going against Nazis and cultists, trying to get these relics and this treasure from around the world, like Indiana Jones. You're dealing with all these different like cities. With each city, the cities have these different encounters. Major cities have different encounters from minor cities. You're dealing with these cliff-hanging adventures where you have this pressure luck mechanism, and more of these kinds of games that are like more Ameritrash, more dungeon crawls and adventure games, they need to use this press your luck mechanism. I don't understand why it's not used more often, because you guys know that I like dice, and dice are they automatically create drama, high highs and low lows, and not a lot in between. But press your luck mechanisms where you can keep rolling if you are succeeding, but as soon as you don't roll a success, it's like boom, wiped out. That creates another layer of drama on top of it. And so I always want more of these kinds of games to use that system, to use some kind of pressure luck system, because it also adds a layer of gamification on top of a game. It's really cool. But yeah, that is a great game. I only play it co-op or solo. I've never played competitively, and I can't imagine it being much fun. Maybe it is, I don't know. But number 3, Fortune and Glory, Jason C. Hill. All right, so now we're coming up to my numbers 1 and 2. In the first part of this top 10 list, I said that a couple things that are really important to me in these kinds of games are games that create a sense of time and place, games that create a setting. That is something that I look for in a lot of my entertainment, be it movies or books, movies especially, and games especially. I like games that make me feel like I am in a world, that make me feel like I am adventuring in a place that, weirdly exists. When I close the box, the world still exists. I know that's kind of silly to say, but I like games that I can imagine that being. Games where the world feels old, it feels lived in, and it creates this really just this tangible sense of like you can reach out and touch it. And these top 2 games do that better than any other game I know. And it was really hard to put these in an order, but I think I've put them in the right order. And so we have number 2 coming in from Adam Poots, and that is the game that this guy belongs to and this nasty guy belongs to, and that is, of course, from Adam Poots, 2015's Kickstarter Mega Millionaire Kingdom Death Monster. I am not going to hold the box up to the camera because I think my box weighs like 40 pounds and it would be very hard to put back on the ground. Kingdom Death Monster is the most unique board game I've ever played. It's a marvel of design. It's messy. It's creative. It is super well written, super well produced. It's kind of raunchy. It has a wicked sense of humor that I don't think a lot of people talk about. It's challenging. It's unfair. It kicks you while you're down, and yet you still want more. It has a ton of expansions. It is very expensive. I mean, it's like it has the most of everything. It does get a kind of a negative rap based mostly on things outside of the game, like the sexualization of females mostly, and the pinup models that the company produces, but none of those are used in the game. And I think the game is actually oddly progressive because it treats the male and female characters as very much equals. They can both get their heads ripped off. And when you do procreate to create offspring to raise in your settlement, the rules very, very specifically state to nominate 2 willing survivors. So it's not the cringe-inducing, over-sexualized game that a lot of people think it is. It is a very mature game, and sometimes it's also a very immature game. When you're fighting your first white lion, like you can like rip its balls off, right? But that's the only game I know of where that can happen, and you can say that a lot about Kingdom Death Monster. A lot of stuff happens in Kingdom Death Monster that does not happen in any other game, and it has that sense of adventure, albeit a very dark and twisted one. And so, coming in at number 1, which is probably no surprise to anybody watching this, that is from Goblinko. That is from 2017. That is from Sean Auberg and Eric Ratty, and that is Dungeon Degenerates: The Hand of Doom. Dungeon Degenerates: The Hand of Doom, one of my all-time favorite games, my favorite adventure game. Talk about a game that creates a world, especially when you add in the storybook expansions that flesh out everything about the game. It's a marvel of a game. And to think that this is the first board game these guys have made, it still blows my mind. This game is better than any other game in the genre from people who have been making games for years and years and years, and somehow they made this system that just it is so incredible. The campaign system, how there are multiple start scenarios, there are multiple ending scenarios, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do in the middle, and it's all based on choices and how the outcome of certain scenarios is. You can play it as a single game, you can play it in the campaign, and it all just works. And one thing that I think sadly that happens is I think Eric Ratty, I think his design and rules are often overshadowed by Sean Auberg's art and the design of the game. And it's easy to see why. I mean, this is my favorite looking game of all time. It is bold, it is unique. When you put this thing on the table, people are either going to say they love it or they hate it. No one's going to say, that looks okay. But you guys know me, I love it. I've done a whole video on the art. But Eric's design is as bold as Sean's art, and that is something that just doesn't get talked about very often. No other game looks this good. I love that the dice system is so cool. So I mean, it has a basic, when you want to do something, you roll against a stat. You want to roll low in this game. So if you were testing your strength, let's say you had a strength of 8, you would roll 2d6. You would want to roll 8 or lower to succeed, but the strength of your success is the single die that has the highest value. So if you rolled a 6 and a 2 against a stat of 8, that would be a success, with a 6 being how good you succeeded at that stat. Awesome system. The characters are all unique. The writing is fantastic. Yeah, like I said, the rule book is super well written. Again, I don't know where these guys pulled this game out of, because I am so excited to see what they do next, and I really hope they just continue to work in the Dungeon Degenerates world, fleshing it out, maybe having other maps that you can go and explore on. So yep, that's my #1 adventure game of all time, Dungeon Degenerates: The Hand of Doom from 2017 and Goblinko. So now let's talk a little bit briefly about some of the games that didn't make the list. Like I said, this list was very hard for me to make because there are so many great adventure games, and I had a handful that were on the short list that were almost on this list, but for certain reasons and others I chose the ones that I did. So some of those that almost made it, Prophecy, I jokingly refer to that as better Talisman, but to tell the truth, if I want to play one or the other, I'm almost always gonna pick Talisman, just because it's simpler, it's easier to get to the table for me, and I have more fun playing it, even though Prophecy is the better game. Near and Far is a game that has a wonderful world, but I feel like its mechanisms get in the way of the exploration and the sense of adventure. A Touch of Evil almost made it, but it has so many elements that are shared with Fortune and Glory that I went with Fortune and Glory because of the pressure luck mechanism. Eldritch Horror, again, if I do this list and revisit this list in 3 years, I could see Eldritch Horror making it onto this list and Arkham Horror 3rd edition dropping off. Tales of the Arabian Nights, fantastic game, tons of adventure, crazy things happening, but it doesn't really lend itself to solo play that well, kind of, but so I don't get to play it that often. Legacy of Dragonholt, I almost included, but this is kind of a list of board games, and I feel like Legacy of Dragonholt is actually a work of interactive fiction in a box. So I really kind of had to draw this kind of arbitrary line there, because if I had included it, it would have been very high on the list. Seventh Continent, I know a lot of people, that's going to be their #1 in this category. I'm interested in the game. I just haven't found the fun and excitement in it yet. I definitely want to play more of it, and I'm constantly thinking about it, of setting it up again and playing more, but it hasn't hooked me yet. Folklore. Folklore, I think, has a wonderful world. It does that overland and dungeon crawl aspect. It has very cool lore and characters and upgrades and monsters and all the kinds of things I look for. It's too fiddly for me to enjoy a great deal as a solo play. I don't really like the D100 combat, because I feel like the +1 and +2s that you're adding with all of your gear, they don't swing that D100 enough. It's so swingy. I don't know why they went for a D100 style combat system. I think the combats, they take far too long for the depth that's there. I am going to, keep my opinions on that open, though, because of the new expansion that's coming out that has some revised rules. I'm really hoping they get it to where I can play as 2 players without as much bookkeeping. Just an easier way to play with only 2 heroes. Fallen Lands, that's probably a game I just haven't played enough. It does have a great sense of adventure and more random encounters than you can shake a stick at. Tons of cool little writing. It is a number, man, you have to have a spreadsheet to play that game, to add up all of and keep track of all of your stats and stuff. So that's probably why that game kind of feels like work sometimes. And then Shadows of Kilforth. Shadows of Kilforth, Gloom of Kilforth. Probably I didn't put those games on the list, probably just because I haven't played them enough. I haven't spent enough time with them. But those are really cool games too. sometimes I feel like there's a little disconnect between the plots and what's actually happening. It oddly feels a little abstract, even though the art is so evocative and the theme is is so prevalent in that art. But yeah, so that's my top. That is my top 5 today. I can't remember if I did a recap, but you got 5 Xia Legend of the Drift System, 4 Runebound 2nd Edition, 3 Fortune and Glory, 2 Kingdom Death Monster, and number 1 Dungeon Degenerates. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.